Do you want to learn how to get healthy, perform at your best, and create body composition changes that last? In this podcast, we're going to talk about all things fitness, nutrition, health, and mindset. You're going to learn how to create real results, and most importantly, how to maintain those results in the long run. I'm Johan Vesters.
I'm Christine Nandali.
And you're listening to Talking Nutrition. Welcome back to Talking Nutrition. Today we have a very special guest, our very first ever guest, Aaron Straker, with us. We're going to talk about objective eating and how Aaron uses data-driven and the data-driven approach basically to his nutrition to create some pretty awesome results, I gotta say, with his clients. So Aaron is a nutrition coach. He travels the world. Could we call it that, like, digital nomad, or do you have like a different word for it yourself? Like,
I mean, like on textbook, that is what I do. I don't like to use the term. I feel like kind of like douchey using it.
Yeah,
it's not like I'm bouncing around and like cafes working and shit like that. Like it's a lot of me sitting at a kitchen table in a small apartment somewhere, working at odd hours and being like, oh fuck, I didn't leave the apartment today. So it's honestly a lot less glorious than a lot of people make it seem. Like I'm not like drop shipping and doing anything like that. No, it's like a lot of client work and stuff by myself in an apartment. But yes, technically that is what I do on paper.
Sounds pretty sad compared to the thing we would imagine, on the beach, you're sitting in the sun, like with your laptop.
Yeah.
No, that's cool, man. I'm jealous. I gotta say, like we're nearing polar night here. I think it's just about a couple of weeks left, and then there's no sunlight for 2 months. So
Man,
you going to like
rough.
Bali and shit, like it makes me fucking jealous, But anyway. Back to the introduction. So as always, guys, before we get into the podcast, make sure to screenshot and share this episode in your stories. It's the best way for us to kind of get the word out, and to get it to other people, basically. So first of all, thanks for coming on, Aaron.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
Yeah, cool. So let's just start with a quick introduction. So who are you? What do you do? Right? How did you get into coaching? And then we'll get into like your approach and stuff. But yeah, basically tell us about yourself first.
Yeah. So my name is obviously Aaron Straker. I own and operate a nutrition coaching lifestyle optimization company called Straker Nutrition Company. A little bit of a point of advice for any people who are interested in entering the space. I personally would not recommend naming the company after yourself, but yeah. I think like all three of us are in that boat.
I'm changing it next year. Yeah.
But it's just like the hindsight. When I started, I remember I was like literally filling out my S Corp paperwork, which is like my legal structure here in the United States. And I was like, oh fuck, like I need a name. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And now like years later, I'm like, why did I?
Exactly what happened to me.
Same.
I was like, KA Nutrition.
Yeah. I feel like it, not to sidetrack us, but it just kind of, it makes it, I feel like it's hard to like detach your ego from things, and that's also kind of led me into how I look at my structuring my business. So I've been like very, very incredibly hesitant to like ever bring on assistant coaches or anything of that matter, because I'm like, that's my name at the end of the day, and I can't make someone else care as much as I care, sort of thing. And that's really messed with me a little bit. But to get back on track, got into nutrition coaching just through, I used to be a software engineer. And fortunately I found myself in the burgeoning Southern California CrossFit scene in like the early 2010s. And that was actually life. And, writing code was just how I paid rent and paid my bills so I could go hang out at the gym and stuff. And I had just got to a point where like, I gave it like the good old post-college try. I'm like, this world isn't for me, sort of thing. And then I had always kind of known that. And I wanted to go to school for like exercise phys in the beginning, but a family member talked me out of it because there's no money in that. Here we are, like 18 years later.
Yeah.
But I did that, and then I had been looking for something else, and I had a very, very good friend, Jen Ryan, who's pretty big in the CrossFit space. And I was helping her do some business stuff. And then just through that, we would have like weekly meetings, and I was getting to see like a lot of the applications and inquiries coming in. And I had just assumed that because like I was super into CrossFit, like I got into nutrition as a byproduct of that. I assumed all these other people would as well. And that was a very large like oversight on my standpoint. I think I was just really fortunate that I had really good kind of resources around me as friends, like Jen Ryan, who's now gone on to be like a 6 times, CrossFit Games athlete. Brian Borstein, who's the co-host of my podcast now. And then Anders Varner, who now runs Barbell Shrug. Like those are my friends in the gym, and I think I really just got lucky with that network around me of having really good influences. So my level of knowledge just that I picked up from people like that was higher. And I kind of saw a position. I knew that I knew I was ready to get out of the software world. It was just like, what else could I do sort of thing. And the gym and eating and like healthy were my hobbies really. And there was a lot of people doing, like the fitness side of things, programming, that side of thing. But outside of like bodybuilding competitions, I didn't really see like many males in the nutrition space. It was overwhelmingly like female dominant. And I found, I was like, well, here I am. I don't necessarily want to get into like bodybuilding. Like that was my thought back then. I see like a market thing here. There's guys who want to look better. They want that, superhero-esque type physique. They want to be happy with their body composition, but there's a gap here. It's either like, you're either overweight and unhealthy, or you're trying to get on a bodybuilding stage. Like that's the two kind of avenues I saw. But I was like, here's this space this is where I am existing. And like, I don't want to necessarily get on stage. I'm not overweight and unhealthy technically. This is where I am. And that's really where I found that's what kickstarted everything for me. And just a desire to do something that I spend my time doing, something that I wanted to spend my time doing, and not just, writing code for a paycheck anymore.
Makes sense.
So that all started in 2010. You started coaching. So you've been coaching since then?
No, that was in like 2017 was when I started spending like a lot more time around Jen Ryan with her business and stuff like that. And what really was a catalyst for this, and I know both of you guys have been in the CrossFit space in years prior and stuff. So Jen used to be the nutrition coach for Lauren Fisher. And one day Lauren posted about her, and within a 48-hour period, over 500 client inquiries came in.
Oh my gosh.
And she like called me like crying, was like, can you help me? So this is like, I just like wrote some code to like parse her email into like spreadsheets and stuff so that we could start like filtering it and actually like going through it. So that was like the real catalyst of me actually having like hands into a business, seeing inquiries coming in and like reading them. And that was like what really, really kickstarted everymenting for me. And then I got some certifications and, different things down that road.
Right. Cool. Yeah. I mentored under Cody McBroom, and Jen was in that mentorship with me. So I know her through that.
Yeah. She's awesome.
Yeah, she is. So with your nutrition coaching, do you do mostly one-on-ones, and it's just men, right?
So for the longest time, it was only men. I do have a very small number of female clients now. Again, I specialize in men, right? It's where it's where I'm best, right? And if I'm being super transparent there, the straightforward answer is like women's the endocrine system, metabolisms, it's harder. It's harder work. And I'll be very, I'm not one to try and cut around that. Right. So I just stick to what I'm good at for right now. And then I'm sure eventually like I'll want like more challenges, or just as you go on, you learn more and it won't be as challenging. But I also know enough to where I'm not gonna be like, well, here's your macros. If it's not working for you, you must not be following it. Like I know that there's more under that. And then, with any kind of client like that, I'm going to get labs and stuff. And then you uncover things kind of quite regularly. But Yeah, mostly men. I am doing mostly like one-on-one now. I did have kind of a program that I ran in the past. And if I'm being, again, super transparent, I wasn't delivering the caliber of results that I wanted to personally deliver with my coaching with that program. And the reasons for that is there was just too many assumptions I had to make at the program level and by its design. So it was like 24 weeks long. So essentially 6 months. By me framing it as such, I was selling a result at the 26 week mark. And
Right.
that makes a lot of assumptions around each client. Some would do fantastic, but then others like really wouldn't get the ball rolling. They couldn't really be consistent tracking and stuff until like week 15. And then it's like, we got 9 weeks, right? You're not losing 30 pounds in 9 weeks, And that I just kind of realized that if I want to deliver the true caliber, quality that I want to be known for, I can't set this pre-frame of 4 months, 5 months, 6 months sort of thing.
Right.
There.
So were you taking like a group of people on at once, like everyone starting at the same time and then finishing? Got it. Yeah, that's definitely hard considering all the different situations that come to you,
Yeah, and it was nice in that it helped me plan from a business standpoint a little bit better. So I'd be like, okay, I open my coaching at 5 times per year sort of thing. The price is X. Price is paid up front.
Right.
And I know like, okay, I just started 20 new clients. That's X amount of dollars. I can plan. I know I'm going to launch again here. But it really, I just didn't love it, and I know people like my girlfriend runs a program. That is her style of program. She loves it, but everyone's going to be, different. And I just found that it just didn't work great for me. And I got a lot of anxiety around those launches and like selling and stuff like that. Like I fucking hate selling.
Oh, so yeah, I know. Me too.
So what I've moved to has been much easier there. And then like whenever I do put on like my stories or the occasional post about like coaching or an email, it's not like the pressure is on, because what I found now is now my clients stay with me like significantly longer. Like the last time I launched that, my MPP, which is what it was called before, was last Black Friday. So that's coming up on this month, and I would say like I still have, I think like 9 or 12 clients that are still with me from last November.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. One question, because I know, you work with predominantly men, and something I was really curious to ask you about was men and their relationships with food and body image, and how much of this do you see? Because like in my coaching, I notice it a lot more with women, struggling with issues like this. I mean, I do see it in men sometimes, but do you think that's like a pretty big issue with men that's not talked about a lot?
I think so. I think it's probably not quite as large because there isn't the like societal pressure on men to like look a certain way nearly as it has historically been with like women. But I think like growing up, especially if you're into sports or whatever, or even things like, I was just having this conversation the other day, like superheroes, right? You never see like a superhero that's like a regular ass fucking looking dude, right? Everyone's like on paper, superheroes are all roided out. Like, let's be completely transparent. And like, there's no kid's doll where he's like, okay, there's this like 5'8", 165 pound superhero. You know what I mean? So I think like it's kind of like conditioning as you grow up of just not necessarily unattainable standards of like manlyhood or whatever you want to frame that as. It's just not unattainable. It's just unrealistic for the majority of people, right? For that. So I think it's not as big, and I don't think men are as transparent or openly communicate about it yet. But I do have one of the biggest things that I changed with my coaching this year was just getting like really, really effective at communication and establishing like transparent lines of communication and that sort of thing. And I do get more of it now with guys who are like, I do want to be lean. I do want my wife to be like happy she's with me when we go to the beach for our family vacation and I take my shirt off, sort of thing. And that took like prying from me, because I'm sure you guys experience too. You onboard a new client, you talk about goals, and their goals are like, be healthy and, get good at fitness. And then like you quantify that, or like, what does that mean?
Right.
You know what
right.
I mean? Like those are not objectable, like quantifiable metrics we can work towards.
Right.
So oftentimes I'll hear like, you'll say like, oh, like I don't really want to lose fat, but like I want abs. And like, yeah, that the scale needs to go down for that to happen. You know what I mean? So I think it's just better open communication around it. But yeah, I would say, to kind of circle back to the beginning of the question, it's not as large, but it is there still.
Right. Yeah. Got it. That makes sense. Cool. Johan, your turn. Ask some questions.
Sure. Where do I begin? No, that's cool. I think in a way it is also really cool that you are mostly working with men, because then you just get really solid at like delivering solid results like with dudes, and like you said, hey, with women's hormones, it's definitely a different story, and we can still create awesome results, but still, like it is much different for sure. I was actually wondering already if you were still doing the group thing, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of like quietly folded it in at the beginning of the year. Yeah, and it's been like, and it hasn't been. I'm still doing pretty much the same thing, right? It's still a lot of the same periodization, a prove it to me model, that you're ready to go through a calorie deficit by thriving and being able to be consistent with more calories and that sort of thing. So I still use the same kind of sequencing of nutritional periodization, but it's just like I've opened the business structure up. Because another thing that would happen to me is like 6 weeks into a new program, someone would reach out like, "Hey, Aaron, I want to sign up," and I'm like, reach out in May, right? That person never reaches out in May, and I was like, "There's this person who wants to sign up with me." And I'm saying, hey, no, come back in like 4 months. Like from a business standpoint, that's just not really smart when you have people that want to give you their money and sign up for coaching.
I actually have a question. So are you finding that you've been able to connect more with clients with this structure versus that old structure?
It's hard to say, because in not in the best fashion, I changed multiple variables at the same time. Okay. So I changed that fashion, and then I had one thing I would do at the end of that program is I would have like an exit survey thing, and I got a lot of overwhelmingly positive feedback. I got one negative feedback last year, and that changed how I approached my coaching. Because like, let's face it, everyone's like, oh yeah, you're great, this is awesome, like you're not going to change anything. But then when someone comes through and they're like, I'm not happy with the money I spent, blah blah blah, like you're like, oh fuck, like I need to change something. And that was the biggest change to my coaching, was just being like brutally transparent in communicating that. And that was the biggest thing that really helped foster that better coaching relationship. And I do it from the onset, because you're going to get people who clients want to impress you, right? Yeah. So they'll like kind of not like cook the books, but they'll make it seem like, oh no, I'm not hungry. Where I'll be like, well, you're like 6'5", you're 255 pounds, and you're eating like 1,900 calories. You should be absolutely starving. Mm-hmm. And then be like, okay, like I'm really, really hungry, but I can deal with it. I'm like, no, we don't want to deal with it. You know what I mean? Like we want to find that threshold of what you should be eating to upregulate things to make you feel, you know what I mean? So I'm obviously preaching to the choir with you guys, but yeah, it's just establishing the clear and transparent communication on the front end has been a game changer in my coaching, and like in the lengths that people stay, the clients, the more effective we can be when we need to like pivot or take diet breaks or things like that. It's just a much more open, transparent coaching relationship because of that.
Yeah, nice.
I like that. I think too and this is actually a question that I had and deleted. because you already kind of answered it, like throughout the metabolic performance protocol, you would have people go through that, periodization model. As you mentioned already, okay, some people would be very good at tracking, other people would have a hard time getting into it, which makes total sense. Like we all have people like that where, one person starts tracking and it's just spot right away, and we're just good. And then for someone else, it might be months. And that's shit that people don't really think about or expect, It's like, oh yeah, like we'll get started right away. We'll start losing fat right away. But reality is like there's a lot of stuff that we actually have to get into. But I actually wanted to go back a little to the periodization model and kind of like talk about your objective approach. So first of all, of course, with the tracking, with the data and all that, but then also kind of how you structure those different phases, because as we know, like you don't just want to be dieting. You don't just want to be bulking all the time. There needs to be like a plan. I think especially this time of the year, it's good to talk about this stuff, So let's get into that. Basically your approach with your clients. So with that data and how you periodize that.
Yeah, so I think this is where my background comes in a little bit. Like I previously mentioned that I had a prior career as a software engineer. I'm very like data and analytics heavy because it helps us make more informed decisions, right? Because especially when it comes to like your appearance and hunger and satiety cues and feelings, right? These are things that are largely subjective. And as a coach who we're obviously coaching online and we're not like in person asking, a lot of questions or seeing these people daily, the better data you have, the more objective decisions you can make. And that helps you make the right call more over a long enough time horizon. Because oftentimes, like there's obviously I have like a very objective part of my check-in, and I have like this subjective part, like a questionnaire, and clients will be like, well, I'm feeling fluffy. I feel like it's not working, right? They'll say things like that. And I'm like, well, we're down like 1.4 pounds on average over last week. So, your feelings, you can feel those feelings all you want, but the scale and all of our other important metrics of tracking fat loss are telling us that things are going well. So we're going to keep doing that. And it just helps you combat those fears and subjectivities of clients as opposed to like my opinion versus your opinion. You can be like, well, this is what the data is saying. The data says that we are leaner, our weights are lower, like training is progressing, right? Especially, and then the same thing with the opposite, right? When the scale is going up, or we're in a gaining phase, clients are like, I don't know, I don't think I should eat this much. I'm like, well, we're up like 0.6 of a pound on average over the past 2 weeks. That's well within our upper and lower bounds of the muscle gain model. Your lifts are progressing, like sleep is good, stress is low, like things are working, right? Like it's okay to get scared sometimes, but like over a long enough time horizon with enough like repeated bouts of reinforcement that things are positively working, it's going to be fine. Yes. So it really just helps to combat fears and subjectivities at a level that's, more profound than my opinion versus your feelings or my opinion versus your opinion or whatever. Cause it removes the like, hey, you just need to trust me because I'm your coach. Like that is, you never want that to be the only card you have to pull. And then also as a coach, we're going to be wrong sometimes, right? We're human. That's human nature. And the more information that I have that helps me not have to rely on like my intuition or call that could be wrong sometimes, the more confident I am and the more, convincingly I can speak to my client, which then helps them feel like, well, he's super assured. I should feel assured. If I'm like going in sort of shaking, I'm like, I don't know, it might not be working. Like it might be working. Let's see what happens. They're not going to feel very comfortable with that. But when I do not have that, when I go in confident because the data and metrics that we're tracking and I'm reading, I'm very confident in, it just really helps that conversation delivery like across the board.
Yeah. And so many people need that objective part of it, right? Like that's like me, myself, I just hired a coach because I need that person that can look at things objectively, because we just get so easily tied up in our own emotions and like how we feel. And so data is so important for that.
Yeah. And that's one thing, like I don't have a coach right now because I just have a lot of business stuff going on, but I do not do well without a coach.
Yeah.
I kind of will just like kind of transition back to like my default, or my habits. And I love having a coach, and because it removes the decision-making process for me. Like I make decisions for people all week long on training and nutrition and stuff. The last person I want to do it for is myself. And I'll go through periods, right, where like I'm in like a heavy program building phase. So like I'm testing everything on myself. So like I can't have a coach right now, or the quality of things that I would deliver to my clients right now would suffer. But when that's over, I'm going to go right back to having a coach too.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. We similar to like your tracking, your metric tracker, we have the same thing. We're like, so much data, averages, we work with more females. So we have like menstrual cycle on there, which is like a really powerful thing because we could really start to correlate different stuff. And then there's lots of emotion, and it can be lots of emotion around that. So it's so helpful.
Yep. It really, really is.
Yeah.
I swear I had sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I had a conversation yesterday, and I literally told the dude, like, this is why we have the data, because he's like, fuck, I don't feel good. I feel like I messed up completely. Last weekend, I had cookies and all this other bullshit, like his words, actually. I had all this stuff and I don't feel good about it. I did really bad. So I looked at the data and I looked at his week. I was like, okay, cool. So we have 2 weigh-ins only now. It's Tuesday, yesterday. So we have 2 weigh-ins that are just about a kilo higher, right? First of all, we never go off 2 weigh-ins, so we're good. We'll wait until you're checking because we use the average, Let's actually zoom out. So I went to chronometer, I zoom out the graph, from 1 week to 2. It's like, okay, it's pretty stable. So we're actually reversing right now, Now let's actually go back to the all-time graph. And I showed him the thing, and it shows like his 25 fucking kilo weight loss phase, I was like, look, you're fine. We just lost 25 kilos. We just bumped up like half a kilo on a weekly, 1 week to the other. Plus, these are your photos. These are your centimeters. You're feeling great. Your workouts are awesome. That's why we have the data. That's why we do this stuff,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's usually the response.
And that's why I think, as much as some people have a little bit of pushback towards that, like people say things like, tracking is obsessive and calories and, all this stuff and macros, and it doesn't work for me. But it's like, well, it does work. We just need to learn how to apply it to you and actually. How do you think about that pushback actually?
I get what you're saying. The thing that I really love, I love the parallels between tracking your food and tracking your finances. Right.
Yeah.
It's the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
And it's really the people who are like, tracking doesn't work for me. Right. There could be people whose schedules are so insanely erratic, or the thing that comes to mind, you're on the road salesman sort of thing, salesperson. You're estimating so much of your food, it's a crapshoot.
Right.
Principles are going to be better for you in that regard, because you're probably going to be just as accurate with principles than you would be when you're estimating 95% of your weekly meals. Right. That one I totally get. But it works. Tracking your finances work. You can't, if you want to intuitively spend, don't be mad when you don't have any money at the end of the month, sort of thing. And it's the same thing. Human intuition is created from our upbringing, maybe parents or something like that. There's really great example. My girlfriend's finance habits are just they're tier 1. They're very, very uncommon. And when we all have conversations about it, I'm like, no one else grows up like that. You know what I mean? I was someone who was horrible with my finances, literally until I met her. And she sat me down and showed me I forget, a cost spend analysis sort of thing. Well, long story short, I was eating all of my money, which is probably not surprising. But there was a real quick side note. There was this place we used to live in San Diego that I loved called Flame Broiler. it was literally just like little teriyaki rice bowls, right? Like steamed vegetables, white rice, you know, a mix of like flank and like chicken thigh, right? And it was literally like a block across the street, like up the block from the CrossFit gym. So we went, it was January 17th when we did this, you know, spend analysis. And I had already been to Flame Broiler 21 times that month. So there were some days I was going multiple times per day. And I was literally eating all of my money. And I was like, okay, this is why I don't have any money, because I'm just literally eating so much freaking food.
Right.
But to take it back to the tracking, yeah, it helps put data and numbers in front of you that will inform your decision making. And then over a long enough time doing that, you kind of like reformat your intuition. Like, let's say you had a budget that you followed like religiously for like 15 months. You're going to reframe some of your spending habits. Maybe you go from getting takeout 9 times per week, like I was, to like maybe just Friday night. You know, you do that for 15 months. If you stop tracking those finances, you're probably not going to go back to having it 9 times per week. You're probably going to consistently stick with that Friday night. And the same thing happens with tracking. Like, we end up, you know, I call it a feeding framework, right? We're going to eat X number of meals per day. Eventually you're going to start getting hungry at those times, and you're not going to get hungry at like 10 p.m. at night or whatever, if you have a meal at 7:30 or whatever like that. And then when you track your food over a long enough time horizon, you're probably going to find yourself in a new body weight, body fat settling point based off of these new habits and the types of foods you're eating and stuff. And then let's say you don't have any goals anymore. You're just like, hey, I'm at a healthy body weight. You know, my priorities, my family and my kids. I train 3 times per week just for general health. You don't need to track your food anymore. If you're like, hey, I'm at whatever, my 135 pounds, 175 pounds, I just want to be happy here and stay here and prioritize family time. You can do that without tracking. But when you have goals and you're not tracking them, I find it very short-sighted to think that it's not going to work for you or anything like that. Just if you wanted to save $10,000 for a down payment on a house or whatever, like, you're not just going to like, I'm going to intuitively save this month. Like, no, you're going to put a fucking plan together.
Right. Exactly. On that, what are your thoughts on the pushback with that tracking macros leads to disordered eating?
I think it can, if you do not pair tracking macros with a fundamental understanding of food sciences.
Yeah.
Like, if you're just playing macro Tetris all the time and you're just playing like IIFYM, or not understanding like periodization and times of eating more when you want to gain muscle, times of eating less when you want to lose fat. Like, if you're always just trying to lose fat, the plan probably isn't very good, because it shouldn't take, unless you're starting at like, you know, very, very considerable overweight, then you have a very large, you know, gap to cover. But aside from something like that, it shouldn't be, you know, 8 months every year or something like that, because you're not actually doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
It's tricky.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, me too. Like, it is tricky when people try to do that on their own, you know? And I'm like, I've done that, you know, a decade ago. Like, I think a couple of episodes ago, I was talking about that, where I had these like tiny mints, or like 1 gram each, you know, like just like for fresh breath, whatever. I would like track them like each, and I had like no idea, and I was getting like super caught up in logging all of that stuff, and I had no actual understanding of the calories, of the macros, you know? So I can see when people try it out incorrectly that it can lead to some issues. But, you know, as you said already, like, if you get educated on it, if you're shown how to do it, and if you're not just going into it with like, I'm going to do this for fat loss, and then after that, I'm just going to let it go, I think, you know, it's probably not going to lead to that. And I love the finance example, because if you would tell someone like, hey, you know, like, you know, track your finances, and that person becomes better at spending, everyone would be like, oh, good for him, you know? But then when it's food related, it's like, no, that's obsessive. Like it's the same shit.
The same thing.
Yeah.
And another thing that I will use with like newer clients and stuff, I'm like, okay, we are whatever, we're 34 years old. We have been eating 3 meals a day for the last 34 years. And we know nothing about the food that we put into our bodies. You know what I mean? Like how wild is that? There's like nothing else in our lives that we do every single day for the entirety of our lives that we, you know, fundamentally as a society know fuck all about.
I know. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
It's a problem. That being said, with that periodization model, which I saw for the first time in your MPP in 2020. I remember that I had just become a coach. I just started. I think I heard about your coaching through, what's it called again? Barbell Shrugged.
Okay.
And I checked out your website, and I remember watching that video of the MPP where you go through those different phases where you talk about reverse dieting, talk about building muscle, etc. Let's talk about that a little bit more and explain to the listener like why those phases are there and why you go through that with your clients, and then ultimately like that's how you teach them how to do better on their own, right?
Yeah. So I mean, from a textbook, or and this is actually a fantastic topic of conversation. There was a Stronger by Science episode that came out like about a month ago, and unfortunately they do not number their episodes, so it's like it's something in the beginning and then like reverse dieting is at the end, and then subsequently my podcast, which is called Eat Train Prosper, we just released, I think it was episode 92, a conversation with fellow coach Jeremiah Bear about this like last week. There is nothing like fundamentally revolutionary about reverse dieting, or really any of the periodization phases. What it does is it gives clients, especially newer people, practice in a much simpler and more forgiving an environment to achieve success. So like we come in, we need to find what maintenance is at your current body weight. And that's going to fluctuate from person to person, but generally there's about like a 15% like ballpark for most people if the same types of food are being eaten. The reason I say that is when different types of foods are being eaten, your accuracy, your margin of error just goes up considerably. Simple as that. So we want to be like, okay, if we just want to keep your body weight the same, let's get some framework around this is the bounds that we can do that. Okay, let's start titrating that up a little bit, because it's rare as a coach that someone's going to come to you and they're like, Aaron, I want to sign up for coaching. I sleep great. I feel great. My energy level is fantastic. My sex drive is through the roof. My food log, the quality of my foods are great. These are the types of foods that I eat. I recover well from the gym. I'm following like a great training program, not overdoing it. And it's just, I just want to, lose fat. That's going to be 1 in 60 clients.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People come because no one's like, my life is great. I'm going to hire a nutrition coach.
Right.
You know what I mean? People come to you when they've already tried things, they've beaten their head against the wall, and they just don't feel good. And it is very short-sighted to be like, okay, person whose sleep is awful. If you're a woman, you may have like secondary amenorrhea and not have a cycle. If you're a male, sex drive is considerably low. Stress is very, very high. They're probably doing like Orange Theory or something, like no offense. And the quality, they might be like, I eat a salad for lunch and apple cider vinegar and a lemon for breakfast. And then dinner's like fucking Papa John's or something like that, because I was good on my first 2 meals. Good, air quotes here, right? When that client signs up and you're like, okay, client who doesn't have habits and your biofeedback's terrible, let's restrict your food.
Right. Right.
It doesn't work well. And what the beauty in the periodization is, we're spending time giving you wins in a much more forgiving environment so that we can build the necessary understanding, habits, and foundations that you are going to need to rely on for successful and effective fat loss when that time comes.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's really the periodization in a nutshell. And then, hey, we've lost this fat. We're down 15 kilos or something like that, 10% of 10 to 15% of total body mass. Now we want to be intelligent around finding what our new maintenance is, because it is going to be different than that first one, because we are at 10 to 15% total body mass loss. There's going to be, depending on how lean we get, how long we've had to diet, some degree of metabolic adaptation, some degree of endocrine system downregulation from us being in a constrained energy environment. Now let's titrate out of that and discover what is, that maintenance again, and doing the best we can to mitigate unnecessary body fat accumulation in effort of doing so. There will always be some that comes back up, especially depending on how lean you get. But what we really want to mitigate is unnecessary amounts.
Yep. Same deal over here. Love it. Do you think would you say that one of the number one reasons why people end up with the weight regain is because of the lack of extra strategy like a reverse diet?
I think it's the strategy and the psychological aspect of understanding, like, if you go back to what you did before, you will have the results that you had before,
right,
over a long enough time horizon. Like, yep. That's something that I think people and coaches especially do not do not all coaches, of course, a adequate job of explaining, like, in order to maintain this, you need a new identity.
Yeah.
You need to take on the identity of the version of yourself at this, like, body composition, body weight, et cetera, et cetera. Now, does that mean, like, you can never drink or eat out or anything like that again? Like, no. But if you go back to what you were doing before, even though you've lost the weight over a long enough time horizon, that weight you will end up right back where you were.
Yep. Yeah,
and
totally.
Something that I haven't personally experienced because I just never did it, but, like, I've had some clients who, like, didn't want to take the reverse dieting approach and just, like, go back to maintenance. And I don't think there's anything, like, physiologically that is worse. It's a psychological and accuracy standpoint that people can't control it. Whereas, like, with the reverse diet, if I, as the coach, frame it as, like, we are not out of the woods yet, but the hardest part of dieting is over. We're still going to be in a calorie deficit, but not as deep in a calorie deficit as we were. And it helps, like, titrate your hunger and stuff, I guess, would be back down as calories come up. But if I'm just like, okay, Johan, we've dieted, we're down, 15 kilos, we're at 1,800 calories now, boom, tomorrow, 3,400, go, right? The first thing is, like, your digestion's probably going to be a mess.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're down regulating enzyme production, HCl production, those sorts of things. And then two, people will just go, they can't contain it in a super unconstrained environment. And that 3,400 calories turns into 4,000, 4,200, food quality drops. And, like, the next thing you know, you're up like 6-7 kilos. And like, I've had that happen. The few clients that I have let do that because they were higher level clients, we got leaner, they were, like, coaches and stuff themselves, backfired. And it's just like, well, this is one of the things, and this is what we talked about on the episode that we did. Textbook, yes, reverse, there's nothing inherently, magical about reverse dieting. From a client psychology standpoint, in accuracy, that is where the magic of it actually lays in.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's switch over, less about nutrition, more about Aaron. Tell us about the lifestyle you're living, where you guys kind of hop around, and how you feel about that. I want to hear more about that.
So it's been, man, it's really crazy to think it's coming up on 4 years in, like, 2 months that I haven't had a home. Like,
I was going to ask, like, when did you start doing this?
January 2019.
Okay.
So yeah. It's crazy to think it's been that long. Like, the last, like, 5 years of my life, I feel like have been, like, it feels like it's been 5 months. we are slowing down. So we did take out a lease for the first time since 2017
Wow.
in
Okay.
Bali, starting in, like 4 weeks or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be in Bali for a year at least. That's been my, I will say, favorite with like lifestyle, everything. I would say of all the places I've been, Vietnam, I think, has been my absolute favorite place I've ever been. But not to like live really, because just trying to communicate
Yeah.
directions, like you get crushed with a lot of that stuff.
Right.
But Bali's like really turnkey for like the lifestyle that the three of us lead, like super, super fitness focused, healthy food everywhere. Like the beach is close by. There's people from all over the world, which is one of my favorite things. You just
Mm-hmm.
meet people from every corner of the planet there, which is super, super cool. Locals are really, really friendly. The local culture is really cool. And it's inexpensive, which always helps. Is always fun as well. So that's like kind of my favorite. It started as literally a conversation between my girlfriend and I, where I just said like, it would be cool if we lived outside the country for like a couple months. And as we were, the businesses were building and we transitioned out of our like previous, full-time roles, we're like, it was a perfect time, right? Like we have a bunch of money saved. Um, let's just do it now, before we can't, sort of thing. And the original plan was to go away for like 4 or 5 months. And that turned into like 7, 8 months. And then when we came back, we're like, yeah, we're just going to keep going. So then like we sold what little left we had. I sold like my truck that I had still in the States. And that was like right before, that was like end of 2019. And then we were in Colombia in South America and the pandemic happened. And that was very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And then we just keep going. But I do think kind of slowing down, some of that is, as the business grows, it does get hard. And like I said, I'm not sitting in cafes,
Right.
working or something. The only time I'm like working in a cafe is if I'm like building something, if I'm working on a new feature from one of my like coaching models that, I sell and that sort of thing, or if I'm like building a new training program. Those are like the only
Mm-hmm.
things that I can actually do in like a coffee shop or an airport
Right.
or something like that. I have a podcast that I record weekly. That one's been interesting as I travel. When I'm in Bali, we record that at like 10 p.m. my time because
Oh.
it's 6 a.m. for my podcast co-host in
Yeah.
Colorado. So those different things have wrinkles. I do, all client videos and stuff like that. Like it's not as glorious as people make it think. For the type of business that we are in, the
Right.
business is my priority, and that has like the traveling, like the Instagrammableness of the travel has like taken a back seat to that. But I enjoy it. I do like the option to be like, well, if we want to, let's just go here and enjoy it for a month or 3 months or something like that.
Right. How do you, when you're traveling like that? Well, I know you guys spend like a decent amount of time in each place, but
It's a big part.
yeah, do you find it easy to adjust in these different places, or like how do you go about that when it comes to your nutrition and training?
Yeah, so that one I always plan. So like before we would go anywhere, like I knew what gym we would be going to, or like here's a short list of the gyms we're going to take a look at.
Yeah.
We know we want to live approximately in this area because it's close enough to the gyms and that sort of thing. The availability of the local market in like supermarkets and stuff, that one was a bit of an eye opener for me. I hadn't really done honestly much travel at all before we took on this lifestyle. And probably one of the best parts about the United States is the supermarkets. And you're not really prepared when you go to other countries when you're like, oh, it's like there's not nearly as much here. Like I wasn't prepared for that.
Okay.
And it just like forces you to adapt and like, oh, well,
Yeah.
I have to go to this like market and then try and figure out what the word for spinach is in like Vietnamese and try and find spinach and like, oh, spinach isn't a thing here. Like,
Yeah.
there was some of that. And then just like finding things like getting protein powder, right? Or
Yeah.
creatine and different things. And you're like traveling to some strange part of town that is off the tourist maps, and you're like trying to be like, yeah, protein powder. So like, but I mean, they're funny stories once you realize that like you're gonna get your ass kicked trying to do it.
Right.
After like the first like year, I found like much easier to where I'm like,
yeah,
we're going on an adventure.
Right. When I traveled to Italy, I was like, and I was competing at the time, I was like, oh my gosh. I was in the grocery store, like using Google Translate and trying to like figure out what everything was. I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So, Johan, you got any questions? Any last questions?
Are you avoiding summer on purpose?
You mean winter?
Sorry, avoiding winter. Yeah.
Well,
so I can kind of tell you're always in a hot place.
It's been like a full. Well, I shouldn't say a full. It's been like a decade since I've lived in a winter. When I moved to Southern California in 2011, so it's been over a decade. Your winter clothes are significantly larger than your summer clothes.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're living your life out of a suitcase, that matters.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
So like that's the real reason. And then like in a lot of places, like what's nice about like Bali and Vietnam is like you can just rent a scooter. So you're like super mobile, pretty much just like everyone else is. But like when we were in South America, that wasn't a thing. So you had to be in like walkable areas. And then we did the digital nomad thing in the United States in like 2020 and 2021. And it's hard there, with like just getting around and that sort of thing. So it's just so much easier when it's warm, because it's like when you're carrying your groceries home like 5 blocks.
Right. Yeah, so like these things you don't think about.
Yeah, you don't want it to be wintertime.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, dude. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So like that plays a big part. But I do think when we do stop, which we have maybe like 2 years left, I think max. I'm getting older, as is Jenny, and that plays a role. You know what I mean? So we do plan on settling somewhere with seasons. Like I want the mountains. Like I've lived at the beach for 10 fucking years, and what I've learned in those 10 years is like I don't give a shit about the beach. So I'm ready for the mountains. I think Salt Lake City is where we will settle.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
I loved living in Salt Lake City. It was the best.
Yeah, it was. I never would have imagined. We were literally, like I said, we did the digital nomad thing inside the US in 2021. We landed in Austin and bought a car there because we learned the previous year can't really do the digital nomad thing in the US without a car. So we just bought a car. And it got way too hot in Texas. And then June, and I was like, there's no way I'm spending summer here. This is absolutely disgusting. So we're like, let's go to Utah. Like the mountains are there. We can go hiking. I think it's like a dry heat, let's go. And at the time, like I just wanted somewhere that the gyms would be open still. Cause like we were going to go up to like the Pacific Northwest, and a friend was like, hey, just so you know, like the gyms are all still like closed here and stuff. And I was like, oh, cause we had spent summer in Mexico. Or winter in Mexico for that reason. Cause I was like, I just want to go somewhere where I can go to the gym. Like I'm done doing the gyms are closed thing. Like I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So we went to Mexico because the gyms were open, and then went to Texas because, Texas and Florida were like YOLO places. And then went to Salt Lake, and I absolutely loved it. We extended the time there, and I was like, whoa. Salt Lake is one of the only places I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
But winter was coming. I didn't have clothes.
the winters are actually pretty mild there.
And that's what I heard too. And man, I absolutely loved it there. The mountains there were just absolutely incredible. Like I found a super, super awesome gym and like some cool people. And I was like, I think this is it. I think this is my spot. So
did you ever go to Excel Fitness?
So what's funny is my girlfriend and I actually went to different gyms in Salt Lake. So she went to Excel, and then I went to this like bodybuilding focused gym called Butler Pro Gym. But I had been to Excel a couple times, like when we were like testing them out, and then when I would like the one-off time I would work out with her.
I would like see dope. I would see your stuff, and there was like trails that I'd hike, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I miss it so much.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah. All right. Johan?
Cool.
We done?
I think we're pretty good. We covered a lot. So lastly, where can people find you and what do you have coming up? Any announcements?
I have some coaching spots.
Share?
Yeah, I have coaching spots open as we head into the new year. I always like to kind of start filling them early before like the onslaught of January, or I like to frame it as like, let's not take 10 steps back to try and,
right.
let's do some like damage mitigation through the holidays while still like participating but not indulging, so that we're not like shooting ourselves in the foot and now trying to start from the new year. So
right.
Coaching spots open. You can always find that from my website, which is strakernutritionco.com. You can find me on Instagram at Aaron_Straker. And if you are interested, I have a podcast that comes out called Eat, Train, Prosper. And those are the announcements that I can share. I have a really big, cool one that we'll probably share hopefully before the end of the year, but we're kind of keeping that under wraps until everything is 100% complete.
Cool.
Awesome.
Dude, thank you. Thanks for joining. And let's do it again. Let's bring you back home once the big announcement is out there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you guys so much for having me. I do really appreciate it.
Of course, man. All right. Thank you for listening. As always, make sure to screenshot this episode, share it to your story. And we will talk to you next week. See you guys. Thank you for listening. If you want to help us grow the show, please make sure to leave us a 5-star rating or share this episode on your Instagram stories. Now, if at any point you feel like you need more help, you can always reach out to Christine or myself directly via any of the links in our show notes, because we're here to help. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.